Hello everyone, this is Geoff Bessin with Intuiface. We're going to spend the next few minutes together understanding how to turn your Intuiface experiences into a resource for business insight. It's the beauty of interactive content. You know what people are interested in because they touched it. In addition, because of Intuiface's ability to collect any information accessible to the device, you can also collect contextual information, everything from the weather to gender to sports score, anything that may influence your target audience's decisions and preferences, using that information, using that context to get a deep understanding of who they are, where they are, why they're choosing what they want to do, and turning that into marketing decisions, maybe even design decisions. There's lots of ways to leverage that data, and it's the beauty of having interactive content. You actually have data you can play with. If it's a non-interactive sign, what are you going to measure to determine the success or failure of that deployment? What are you going to measure to make somehow a set of actionable decisions as a result of that deployment? You can't. It's the beauty of interactivity, and that's what we're going to discuss. We'll start with an overview of the Intuiface Analytics solution. Then we're going to walk through the steps one will take to collect information, have it processed, and then create visualizations, charts, and dashboards to get a sense for trends and preferences and ultimately business insights. We'll then wrap it up with a little bit of a look at pricing plans, and then I'm going to give you a set of questions that I think will help you really understand what you can do with analytics, the questions you might want to ask yourself in your particular market space. I think you'll find it very valuable. But let's begin by taking a high-level look at Intuiface Analytics. What does that mean when I say Intuiface Analytics? Well, to start, we're looking at the left of this diagram. We're talking about all of your experiences running on all of your players everywhere in the world, all of them independently collecting data, the data you specify. As you'll learn, we don't force collect any data. We don't know what you want to see, right? If we just collected random data, that's what it would be, random and useless. No, you're specifying which information you want to collect. And all of your players everywhere in the world across all of your deployments are able to do that independently. And then all of them collectively are going to upload that data to what we call the data hub. The data hub lives in the cloud. It lives under the covers on Amazon Web Services infrastructure, so very scalable, very reliable. It's not Intuiface infrastructure, it's Amazon. All of your players are uploading their data to this data hub, whose job is to collate it and prepare it for analysis. Analysis could mean one of two broadly different things. One of them is to use the Intuiface Charts and Dashboards feature, and that's what you see on the bottom fork here. You don't have to leave Intuiface Analytics at all. We have an enterprise-ready set of capabilities for chart creation, configuration, dashboard creation, and sharing. I'll show you some of that. Or if you already have committed to some third-party analytics solution, marketing automation, data warehousing, well, you could do that too, and that's represented by the upper fork here. You can forward the data to these third-party platforms rather than using the Intuiface Charts and Dashboards feature. So the decision is up to you. It's a decision you can make on the fly and that you can change at any time. Let's break down a little bit this notion of data collection. I had said that you can identify what information you want to collect. Let's look at that a little more closely. First of all, there's a set of information we're going to collect about every event you care about. Every time an event that you care about occurs, could be when a video is watched, when a book is read, when an item is put in a shopping cart, when a new scene is visited, any of these events, and these events could be external events too, but whatever that event is, we will always automatically collect a whole bunch of information about that event. Broadly speaking, there's when the experience starts and stops, so that's event independent. Same thing for scene entry and exit, that's event independent, but there's a lot of event dependent things as well, like name of the device, name of the experience, the timestamp of each event, the name of the scene in which that event occurs. All of this information is automatically collected. You don't have to tell us to collect that information. That'd be a lot of unnecessary work. We do it for you. When you identify the event you care about, you then also identify the information you want to collect. You can have as many parameters for a single data point as you wish. Every event is represented by a data point. That data point is any number of parameters you specify. Could be 1, could be 1,000. Each data point could be different. We don't impose any limits on the number of data point parameters. That's up to you. We can record both offline and offline. What that means is that even if your player deployment is in an offline environment, we can still collect information. It does not have to be online throughout the execution of that experience. Now, of course, at some point it needs to be online. Remember, the earlier diagram, players are uploading their data to the Intuiface Data Hub. At some point they need to be online, but they don't have to be online all the time. What happens is player will cache its collected data. It will cache the data points waiting for an internet connection to appear. As soon as the device is online, player will detect it and it will upload its information. So you could be at a 5-day trade show and be offline for 5 days, and that's okay as long as there's enough disk space, enough memory on the device. But it will continue to cache that data locally, and once it sees the internet connection, it will upload that data to the data hub. We do have the notion of sessions in Intuiface, and this is sort of a big deal, so let me spend a moment on it. If any of you are familiar with web analytics, you know that folks like Google are able to differentiate one visitor from another. The way they do that, it's pretty straightforward. In fact, anytime somebody visits a website, the address of their PC, of their tablet, of their phone is known to the website. It can be identified. And every unique address is a unique person. And so it's easy for folks in the analytics world to differentiate one user from another. And further, they can identify individual sessions even for the same visitor. So every person visiting is considered a unique session, and if the visitor comes back 2 days later, it's a unique session. And that's important because you want to differentiate what one user does from another. Right? If you couldn't do that, then it's just a big mess of data. You have no idea who did what. It could be just one person at your website on a million machines, and that's not helpful, right? So the notion of sessions is critical to understanding how each individual visitor uniquely interacts with the website. It's the exact same thing for interactive experiences with Intuiface. It is in your interest to differentiate one user from another. It would be bad if you couldn't do that, because then you just have one giant bucket of data. Intuiface Analytics enables you to differentiate one session from another. Unfortunately, unlike web analytics, it's not easy to differentiate one human from another. We don't read fingerprints, at least not yet. There is no IP address for a human being. So unlike with web analytics, where it's pretty easy to identify individual users, different users, with Intuiface, you need to come up with some sort of method for differentiating them. And there's a few ways you could do it. Just off the top of my head, there could be a start button. Right? And every time the start button is pressed, it's safe to assume it's a new user. Or maybe there's an inactivity timer. If nothing happens for 2 minutes, then reset the experience and assume that anything that happens next is a new user. You see what I mean? They're not totally flawless. I would say 90-10, 95-5, they're going to be accurate, maybe a little inaccurate, but pretty good and a safe bet in terms of enabling you to differentiate one user from the other, which you're going to want to do. When we upload data to the data hub from player, we compress it. It's only text to begin with, so it's not very big to begin with, but we still compress it as much as we can. This is motivated by a desire to limit how much data we consume. We recognize that some of our customers will be leveraging paid 3G, 4G connections, metered connections where they're paying for the data upload. So we compress it as much as we can to minimize the footprint. Finally, looking at the data collection, this works across all of Intuiface's supported platforms, all 6 supported OSs, iOS on the iPad, Android, Chrome OS, Tizen on Samsung Smart Signage platform, Windows, of course, and LG's WebOS operating system on their WebOS Smart Signage. So all 6 operating systems supported by player can be used to collect any information you care about. It's one of the beauties of Intuiface. You don't have to know anything about these platforms to create, run, and collect information from those running experiences on those platforms. It's pretty cool. Let's dive even a little deeper now about the kind of information you collect. We sort of just spoke broadly about the process of data collection. Now let's look at the data itself. There are certain classes of data that are pretty obvious, others not so much maybe. Certainly the obvious type of collected data would be interaction events. What did people watch? What did they read? What did they put in their shopping cart? They touched something explicitly. They interacted with it explicitly, and you want to find out what that is and collect that information. That's pretty obvious. It's typically what people think of when they think about data collection. But there's other information you can collect. There's user identification. Right? So maybe they used a badge of some kind or filled out a form, but somehow they revealed information about themselves. You might want to collect that information. Even if it's just gender, maybe you have a camera that can identify age and gender in an anonymous fashion. That information gives you context to the interaction event. So you don't just know what video they watched, but you know it was a 30-year-old female. Another type of data you can collect, which gives you additional context, is location information. So it could be the floor in the store location, could be the weather outside, could be the city, the geographic location. These things, again, might influence the decisions made by a visitor. Thus, you don't just know what video they watched, you don't just know that it's a 30-year-old female, but you know that it's raining outside. And that's important because maybe a 30-year-old female will make a different decision because of different weather outside. It's possible. If you're in retail, maybe very likely. The more information you can collect, the more context you have, the better you will be at identifying trends and identifying actionable information you can use to make that deployment more successful or take that information and make it more actionable outside the deployment. If you look at the right side of the graphic quickly, I just wanted to remind you to reinforce that other than when the experience starts and stops, other than when the scene is left and entered, you need to identify the event you care about and then assign as many parameters as you want with information and context. So it's entirely up to you to choose which events you should be focused on and what data to collect. And that flexibility is really important because it ensures that you're only collecting the information you really need to make informed business decisions. I'm going to get into a demonstration of the data tracking feature in a moment, but I wanted to highlight something that you need to consider in advance if your intent is to forward data to third-party platforms. And the reason is because for some of our integrations, which are facilitated through what we call connectors, through some of our integrations, they need to be pre-configured before you collect data. It is too late to forward data that's already collected. You must pre-configure those connections before data is collected to make sure that data is available if you're going to forward it to third-party platforms. Let me show you where that is. So if we go to there we go. So if we go to the My Intuiface website, here in the middle column, you'll see analytics data and analytics dashboards. So the job of the analytics data console is to keep track of the amount of consumed data points and to enable you to configure your connectors for the purposes of forwarding collected data to third-party platforms. If we look at that connector section, you'll note that the Excel option, there's nothing to prep here. You specify a date range, devices, applications. You can download into Excel. There's no pre-configuration here. But there is pre-configuration for Google Analytics, Mixpanel, and Segment. If you want to use Google Analytics to perform some of your data analysis, and if you think about it, that could make a lot of sense. There's really not much of a difference between a mobile application, an application in the field, and a website. And about 2 years ago, Google formally recognized the notion of using Google Analytics with mobile applications We've simply adapted that to work with Intuiface experiences as well. So you would need to set up a connector for your specific Google Analytics property. You could have more than one property, but at least one Google Analytics property. If you don't know Google Analytics, you don't know what a property is, but if you know Google Analytics, you do. You give the name, you give the tracking ID, and there you are. You've set up that connection that will automatically forward data from the data hub to that specific property. The same thing goes for Mixpanel, which is a very successful third-party analytics platform. Same thing goes for Segment, which is a middleman for over 200 data analysis, marketing automation, and data warehousing platforms. Segment is this glorious middleman for just about any platform you can think of. All of these three things need to be pre-configured before data is collected. There are other connector options. One is to do a REST Web Services pull to actually pull data from the hub. That you don't have to pre-configure. You do it only when you need it. And also you can have a connection to your own database where we're pushing data into your own database. This would also need to be pre-configured to make sure that it's set up before data is collected. Okay, so that's why I wanted to talk about this now. I wanted to make sure that you understood that some of these things needed to be pre-configured. Okay, great. Now we're going to talk about, via demonstration, how to actually set up data collection and then do your analysis. So let's jump up here to this particular scene. So here's the scenario. We're making a little photo exhibition. There's some sort of starter scene like this. You can see it here. You want to view the photo gallery. After you view the photo gallery, then it comes to this scene where you can track interaction events. The idea is you're browsing the photos in the photo gallery. You want to keep track of what photos did people pick, right? That's what we want to collect. Which pictures did they look at? When people are done here, they might visit the guest book, and on the guest book there's a form, email address, and comment. I want to use the data tracking feature built into Composer to collect that data. I want to know what the email addresses and comments are. All right, so we're going to set that up. We're going to set up this little scenario, collect information, and then talk about analysis. Step number one, we need to add the data tracking interface asset. Now, forgive me if I use some features out of the box without explaining them. There is an introductory webinar which will cover those details. For example, the process of adding interface assets and what those are. I'm going to assume you at least understand that a little bit. So we're adding an interface asset. It's specifically the data tracking interface asset. This enables us to track data, to collect it for analysis. Then I'm going to open up the X-ray panel for the data tracking interface asset and turn on including scene navigation events. I want to identify every time a scene is left, every time it's entered, and indirectly that will enable me to measure dwell time, how long a person is on each scene. I want to include that. By default, it's excluded. I want to include it. Notice experience starting and stopped is included by default. I could shut that off if I want. Great. So I've added the data tracking interface asset. I'm going to collect scene navigation events. I want to add a session, the idea of a session. We said that was important. Let's identify when a new session has started. So in this scene, we have this button. And if you look at this button, currently there's a single action for the event of it being pressed and released. So when the button is pressed and released, then go to the scene named Track Interaction Events. Okay, good to know. That makes sense. It leads me to the photo gallery. I want to identify that a new session has started. Add another action, interface assets, data tracking, start new session. You see that I'm starting a new session. I'm identifying that a new session has started. I have the option here of giving it a specific name. If I leave the field blank, then we assign an automatic session ID. It's this long hexadecimal number. There's no way two sessions will have the same ID. I'm just going to stick with that. I'm going to use the automatically generated ID. One last thing. The way it's currently configured, the go to scene action will occur before we identify that a new session has started. I'm going to flip that. I want to identify that a new session has started first because the original order would be recorded as starting the session when on the new scene. But I'm not starting the session on the next scene, on the track interaction event scene. I'm starting the session now. So I'm flipping the actions, enabling me to identify the session first, and then we navigate to the next scene. Great, so now we're going to the next scene, track interaction events. Remember, what we want to do here is record every single image that's selected. That's what we want to do. Every time an image is tapped, I want to record that it was tapped. Currently, when an image is tapped, this thing slides into view. You see that? It slides up with the name of the artwork, the description of the artwork, a price, the artist name. That's what currently happens now, and I know it's right here. Whenever an image is tapped, then it configures that thing at the bottom of the scene and moves it into view. That's what currently happens now. I want to add one more action, which enables me to collect information about that event for data analysis. Let's add one more action. Get this up here a little bit. Data tracking. Log event. This is what you're going to use very often, is the log event action. That's where you specify a custom event about which you want to collect information. The event name we'll call item viewed. We'll keep the old one. Notice it remembers, if I delete this, you'll notice it remembers all of the event names we've used historically. It's not reading my mind, we've used it in the past. I'll keep that. Let's add two parameters. I want to record the name of the artwork and the price of the artwork. That's what I want to record. So that would be two parameters. Right now, we're not collecting any information. We just know an event happened, an event called item viewed. Let's actually collect info. So the first one will be item name, and the second one would be item price. So we have a name and a price. That's good. Now we need to get the value. So the item name, again, this is another example, forgive me. We're working with interface assets here. So whatever item is selected, I want to get the artwork name, the value of the artwork name property, and put it here. So I'm binding this particular parameter to the artwork name property. And for item price, we're going to price. There we go. So every time an item is viewed, that little thing at the bottom of the scene is configured, then slid up into view, and in addition, we're going to log an event named item viewed with two parameters, item name, item price. Okay. When somebody's done in the scene, they click sign our guest book, they go to the guest book scene. There are two fields here, email address and comment. I want to collect that particular information. So on the left, here's the send button. Currently, the send button goes to the next scene. That makes sense. I would also like to collect the form information. Okay. Add another action. Data tracking. Log event. This one we'll call guest book signed. Remember, that's not magic. I've just typed that in before, so it remembers. Here we have two parameters. One is the email address and one is the comment, right? So this one is email, and the second one, we called it message in the past. We'll call it message. Why not? No, I saw comment. We'll do, I think I saw comment. Yeah, there's comment. Right. So I know that if you look on the left here, there are two text input assets. One text input asset will have the email address. The other will have the comment. So that's where I'm going to grab it from. So for the email address, scene structure, email input, text. So there's the text for the email address. And then for the comment, we have to go to the comment. And here's the text. So I'm sucking in the email address and the comment. Just as we did on that first scene with the button, let me reorder my actions here and move this up. I want to log the event on this scene, not log the event after we go to the next scene. So I've reordered those two actions. Right? And then one last thing. When we reach this scene, I would like to identify that the session has ended. Okay, we started the session earlier. We want to end the session here. Here, let me add a trigger. When the scene has been entered, then data tracking, stop current session. Right? So we started with the button. We're going to stop it when we get here. Okay? Let's generate some data points, shall we? I'm using Composer, pushing play. So remember, under the covers, when I push this button, two things happen. First, I start a new session. Second, I navigate to the next scene. There we go. Here's the photo gallery. I didn't even realize a lot of photos in here. Let me touch this particular cab and up slides that configure data panel here. And in addition, we've logged a data point. The data point is called item viewed. Two parameters, item name, item price. Item name is lemon taxi. Item price is $17.50. Right? Now, of course, the visitor has no idea this happened. It all happens under the covers, but as the photo gallery owner, you want to know what people are looking at, right? So I'm generating some data points here. People are really interested in the photo gallery. Here we are in Thailand. We got a couple nice pictures here. One more picture, why not? Great. Sign our guest book. Email address Geoff@Bessin.com. Fantastic. Did you use Intuiface? Sure looks like it. Send. Now, ending a session, right? When the scene has been entered, we end the session. We've uploaded the data point with the email address and comment. You got it, right? It takes about 30 seconds to a minute for Player to consolidate this data, upload it to the data hub, and for the data hub to collate it and make it available for analysis. So it's not instantaneous, but it's pretty quick. In theory, you could even make dashboards, but certainly you don't have to wait a long time for your data. But I want to show you charts and dashboards. Let's talk about analysis, but I want to reiterate again. Any information you can collect on the device can be used as context for the interaction. Notice, for example, we have all this device information, the country, the city, the IP address, the operating system. On the right for the weather, notice we have forecasted weather, the current weather. This information, we're not making this up. This is coming from either the device or the weather is coming from a third-party weather information provider. But it could be anything. It could be a camera that collects gender and age, and any information available to the device can be used as parameters of a data point, enabling you to have context about the interaction. It's really beautiful how much variety you actually have to get to know your users and how they're influencing the business. All right, so let's talk about the data that's been collected. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is show you the raw data. If you remember, back here on the Intuiface Analytics Data Console, the first connector is called Excel. I'm going to refresh this. That says 1002. Now it's 1023. Did you see that? The data point count went up because we just ran the experience. We generated more data. Let's just take a look at the raw data. So this date range works for me. Download data points. Here's the Excel file. Open. And there it is, folks. So that's the raw data. This goes back to, I started collecting some data yesterday, so you can see we have a couple timestamps here, universal and local, and see there's December 19th, so that's yesterday, and a whole bunch of data here, and at the very bottom is the interaction we just had now. For example, Geoff@Bessin.com, here's my comment, fantastic, did you use Intuiface, sure looks like it. But check this out, so let me scroll up here. All of these columns here represent automatically collected information. Remember I mentioned that? Let's open this up a little bit. So here's the device name, the application name, version of the application. If player was tagged, you'd have player tags here, operating system version. You didn't tell us to collect these things. For every single data point, for every logged event, we automatically collect this information. Notice, here's the unique session IDs. Remember I told you it's long and complicated? These are the automatically generated session IDs. Starting in column N, here's some information. These are parameters. See, name, price, email address, comment, item name. These are all different parameter columns. Every data point can have a unique number of parameters. It's up to you. And you can see them all listed here. And we even have an elapsed time column because remember, for scenes And for sessions, we can measure the dwell time, the amount of time for those things. So here's the raw data. Nothing pretty here, but you can see the information was exactly as we had expected, right? It's everything that we collected in a single place. And maybe you like using Excel and you can make your own charts here, right? You could. Charts and pivot tables. But we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to look at charts and dashboards. Intuiface charts and dashboards. You don't have to leave Intuiface to create your own charts, to collect those charts and dashboards, and to share those dashboards with colleagues and clients. So let's take a look at that. So on the My Intuiface website, to the right of Analytics Data is Analytics Dashboards. Click. And we always default to a particular dashboard. It's called My First Dashboard. I could have called it Geoff. And you'll notice it already contains charts with some data. Because there are certain fields, certain values, certain parameters we always collect, we always know certain data will be available for charts. And so we're able to preemptively create some of these charts, proactively, not preemptively, proactively create some of these charts, all of which can be edited. So you see here, we already have a dashboard with, I don't know, 5 different charts. I can reorganize this dashboard however I wish and move things around. So maybe I want to take this one and swap places and then move this back up over here. So we have a very clean and simple means for organizing multiple charts. Notice I can add additional charts if I want. So if I click Add a Chart, it takes me to our template library. I have, I don't know, 12 or 15 pre-built chart templates that I can then personalize based on my own data, or I can create a new chart. And creating a new chart means I'm literally starting from scratch. Here, I would be building a chart based on the parameters available in my data set. The default date range is set at the dashboard level. You can see that indicated here. Here's the default date range. So for example, we can put scene name on the x-axis. We can put elapsed time by scene on the y-axis. And let's make this an average. So I'm averaging the elapsed time by scene across all of my runs. Notice the default is to have this line chart. In the top of the chart data panel, lots of different chart choices. I'm going to go with the pie chart. Pie chart seems to make sense to me when you're looking at averages. And this retrieve contextual information scene seems to be the one I'm spending the most time on. Here's track interaction events and capture user information. It's interesting stuff. I can personalize this chart however I wish. This button in the upper right lets me play with the chart title and the description, maybe label some of the axes if the chart type has axes. On the bottom, I can personalize it as well. Maybe I want to visualize the data, so here's a chart behind it. I can move, if I had a legend, I can move that around. I can change the color scheme. Lots of different ways to play with this. The filters and chart control, these guys in the middle let me, here it's pre-filter and chart control is post-filter. So for example, under filters, if I drag in scene name, I can specify which scenes should be available to the chart. Without it, I'm saying all the possible scene names. But if I drag this in, I can say, well, no, I just want this one. And so it pre-filters the data. I have a much less interesting chart, but you get the idea, right? So that lets me pre-filter the data. I can also put it here in chart control, which adds on the right, it adds a filter, so I can post-filter the data, right? So in fact, keep an eye on this. Well, chart title, I'm going to call this Geoff chart, pie chart, okay? So here's Geoff's pie chart. It's got a bunch of data here, and right now we have all the scenes selected. That's fine. I'm going to save it, clicking Save. And now in my dashboard, I have Geoff's pie chart. Maybe I want to resize this as I wish, right? Here's the drop-down list. I can interact with these things. Let's deselect, select all, retrieve contextual information, and it still works. So even though the chart is out of edit mode, that doesn't mean I can't still play with the data and make sure it's telling me exactly what I want to know. These are interactive, by the way. I can interact with, in this case, the legend isn't very interesting, but I can deselect items from the legend and pop it out. So that gives you a sense of what I mean about chart creation. You have over 30 different chart types to choose from, 15 plus templates. It's a simple drag and drop tool for creating any kind of chart visualization you can think of. It's really wonderful and super simple to use. The dashboard exists to enable me to organize my work, to organize my charts. Maybe it's for me, maybe I'm the audience, maybe I have a client, maybe it's my boss, I don't know. But I have a whole bunch of charts for a particular dashboard. Notice on the left I can have multiple dashboards. Maybe I have multiple clients. I'm an agency, and every client has a different dashboard with a different set of data, all of which is manageable. I want to show you just very briefly how you can share some of these things. First of all, individual charts can be exported. So if you look here, this button, download, notice I can download it as an image or as a PDF file. I can download the raw data. So individual charts can be exported as flat files or as raw data for analysis, maybe insertion in a PowerPoint presentation, I don't know. The dashboard also has the notion of sharing, but it's a little different in that here you're not sharing one chart, you're sharing a visualization of the entire dashboard. I can have multiple shares of the same dashboard. Each instance of the share has a URL and iframe code. So the same dashboard can have multiple URLs and multiple iframe code, which means I can have different audiences seeing the same dashboard, and then I can turn on and turn off individual shares if I find that necessary. I do have display options. Do I want that shared dashboard to show its name or a custom logo or a description? Do I want to let them play with the date range? Do I want to show all the charts or limit it to a particular chart? So I do have an option of configuring each individual share to make sure it's right for my customer, for my client, for my manager, whoever that audience is. So I have lots of options here for sharing dashboards. Those dashboards are interactive. I can't enter edit mode, but I can still use the chart filter. I can still click my legend to filter the visualized data. All of that is still available. I hope that looks cool. We're very proud of our charts and dashboards feature. And we suspect that most of you will be using charts and dashboards out of the box rather than using third-party platforms. That said, you do have other options. As I talked about earlier, you can forward your data and have that data pulled out. So for example, you can yank data out of the data hub using a REST web services pull. A lot of third-party platforms work that way. You can even do that in Excel. You can suck the data out rather than exporting the data. It's a bit more agile that way. Mixpanel, it's a classic data analytics tool. It's a bit reminiscent of Intuiface charts and dashboards, but maybe you're a very happy Mixpanel client. You can forward your data directly to a Mixpanel project and visualize it there. I also mentioned Google Analytics. You can forward your collected data to Google Analytics properties. By the way, it's not exclusive. You can use charts and dashboards and forward to Mixpanel and forward to Excel, and you can do all those things at the same time. Google Analytics is interesting because one thing they can do is they can track behavior flow. The first scene visited, the second scene visited, the third scene visited. It's something they do naturally, and might be something interesting for you. That's it, guys. It's not hard. Obviously, you got to practice it, but it's pretty easy to do. So now I'm going to jump to pricing. So yes, anybody can test the Intuiface Analytics set of capabilities. And Composer will let you collect an unlimited number of data points. Okay, there's no limits there. If you want to use Player at scale, then you need an Intuiface Analytics plan. It's not complicated. There's only really 3 paid choices, but you do need to consider a paid analytics plan if you want to use Player at scale. So let me talk about that a little bit. And if you're outside North America, instead of US dollars, it's euros. So anybody can use the free plan. This is with licensed players, not unlicensed players. Unlicensed players will not generate data that can be processed. But licensed players with no plan at all can collectively generate 1,000 data points per month. Not 1,000 per player, 1,000 collectively. So the free plan is really about testing things. Composer, unlimited number of collected data points. Licensed players collectively, 1,000 every 30 days. Again, you're doing that to test things. If you want to, you want to actually do real work. You want to eliminate the data point limit. Your first choice is the basic plan. The basic plan is unlimited data points, up to 20 players, one dashboard. Any number of charts, but one dashboard. The basic plan, one dashboard, up to 20 players, any number of charts, any number of data points. And that's 1,500 annually for up to 20 players. If you want unlimited dashboards, unlimited players, then you go to the ultimate plan, which is 5K annual. Unlimited data points, unlimited players, unlimited dashboards, unlimited charts, and you get to customize the dashboard. There's a logo there. You can personalize that logo and to make it a little more unique to your organization. Okay? So if you want to use the charts and dashboards feature, you're choosing between basic and ultimate. You'll notice on the right there is a data collection plan. That exists for Intuiface customers who have no desire to use Intuiface charts and dashboards. They just want to forward data to the platform of their choice. So you notice it's priced in the middle. It's 3K annually. You can collect an unlimited number of data points, but there's no charts. Unlimited players, unlimited data points, but there's no charts and dashboards. You're forwarding data to a third-party platform. Then you'd use the data collection plan. Okay? And of course, if you have other questions about this, you can talk to Intuiface sales, and they can help you out. That's it, guys. It's not that hard. It probably will only take you a few minutes to get to know the feature. The real question here is about questions you can answer, right? So what questions can you answer? Because that's what it comes down to, is how you use the data, not the fact that you collected it, but how do you use it? So here are some questions you can answer thanks to Intuiface Analytics, just to get your blood flowing, right? So in retail, which stores have the most interactive signage use? Which product generated the most interest on a rainy day? What is the percentage of loyalty card holders who have browsed my retail point of sale kiosk? What is the gender split for kiosk users? There's a million questions you could ask. What I'm saying is, wouldn't it be interesting to know the answers to these questions if you're in retail? If you knew these things, that would be actionable insight. You could do things with that information to improve the success of your deployments, to improve the productivity of your stores, or who knows what, right? Maybe you're in sales, so it's a sales presentation. How many times was the pitch delivered? How much time was spent delivering the pitch? What topics were most discussed with a particular prospect? What feedback does the presenter have to share? Sort of a guest book for the sales presenter. If I'm running a sales or marketing team, wouldn't it be nice to be able to answer questions like these to help me understand how effective these sales pitches are, who's using it most effectively, where it seems to be the most and least effective? You get the idea. Maybe I'm at a trade show. How many leads were collected during the first day of the show? What were the most popular videos at a particular kiosk? What was the average idle time for various times of day? What share of sessions were run by staff versus self-service? You really should know the answer to these questions. Not it would be nice, but don't you want to know you're spending money on Intuiface and on the hardware and manning the booth and creating the collateral? Don't you want to know how effective it is, how often it's being used, how important the staff is, right? This is important stuff. And with Intuiface Analytics, piece of cake, no problem, right? A museum, maybe a library, right? Some kind of exhibit. What were the most popular videos or topics? What is the average length of a session? How many members identified themselves at the kiosk, at the exhibit? What feedback did visitors have to share? Another guest book, right? So all of this information is very useful. Finally, hospitality. One more example, right? If I'm a hotel, maybe it's an interactive kiosk in the lobby. What is the most popular menu item on a weekday? which of the promoted restaurants is most often selected on a rainy day, which tourist destination gets the least number of queries, which partner ads generated the most views and requests for an email. This is really cool. Maybe you didn't expect this. You could do paid advertising thanks to Intuiface Analytics, because you're going to know exactly how often each tourist destination was selected. And you can quantify that and monetize it. You could do it. Further, you can identify which restaurants, which destinations, whatever, are popular based on various contextual things like the weather, and that thereby change what you show based on that context, which brings more value to your investment, right? I mean, you're going to create this kiosk in the lobby. You're spending money on creating the content and the material. Let's maximize its usefulness. If you're only showing things useful on a sunny day, then in the winter, people are going to get sick of the kiosk, not use it, and they're going to remember that. Make it sticky, right? Find out what influences people's choices, what makes it interesting and popular. Find out what tourist destinations are ignored. Stop listing them. How would you do that without collecting information? It just makes so much sense, right? Lots of information is located in our online library. Everything we discussed and more is available there. One thing I'd like to suggest is going to our marketplace. All of the samples in our marketplace generate scene navigation data. That will give you dwell time information. So you always have that basic information from all of the samples. They all have the data tracking interface asset. All of them are collecting scene navigation information and, of course, experience started and stopped. But we have enhanced some of these samples as well to generate additional data. You can see them mentioned here. So, for example, the restaurant menu, the sushi restaurant, we're also keeping track of the fish that's selected. Right? So it's a great way to get to know the features and look at an experience that's already configured. And then run to your dashboard, to the Intuiface Analytics dashboard console and start playing with the charts and building your own new ones and that sort of thing. So thank you for your time and attention. I hope you're inspired to use the feature. We're really proud of Intuiface Analytics and think it just brings enormous value to our users. Thank you for your time and attention, and have a good time.